We begin this afternoon, this 2012 National Soccer Hall of Fame induction ceremony with the Colin Jose Media Award. Colin really dedicated his career, his life to covering soccer, and in fact was the official historian of the National Soccer Hall of Fame from 1997 to 2007. Simply put, the award is designed to honor members of the media who specialize in contributions with respect to soccer in the United States and do so with exceptional, and this is the key part, exceptional and sustained quality. Our 2012 member is about to be introduced, but he's LA Times writer Grahame Jones, and I can only tell you, after love, a guy whose farewell email says something about the old sea dog having broken from his anchor chain. I'll leave it at that. But to present Grahame Jones is the 2010 recipient of this award, and they worked numerous World Cups together. I don't want to say how many. I'm just going to leave it at numerous. And Paul, of course, as I mentioned, was the winner just a couple of years ago. To present Grahame Jones, the one and only Paul Gardner. Paul?
I've been told that I have a limited amount of time here. So, ladies, gentlemen, honorees, our respected chairman, Maitre D, MC, what did you say you were? Maitre D. Until quite recently in this game, before the referees were armed with cans of shaving cream, there was a soccer tradition that you were allowed 10 yards. You got 8, maybe. Now, it works the other way around in these Hall of Fame ceremonies. I've been told I get 3 minutes. You're probably going to get about 5, so you've been warned. Not least, I need that time because there's a lot to know about the man that I'm presenting to you here this evening, the journalist Grahame L. Jones. The first thing I'll tell you is something that I don't know. I don't know what that L stands for. I don't know anybody who does, and maybe not even Grahame himself. He told me once that he was a Liverpool fan. Could be Grahame Liverpool Jones. Possibility. But if so, I have to tell you that despite that affliction and the further problem of his Welsh background, he has been, since I first met him, the most unfailingly pleasant, I think, of all the colleagues that I've had during these trips that we make here. I did spend part of the 1982 World Cup driving around Spain with Grahame. He did the easy stuff, speeding merrily along the highways and chatting away and not paying much attention to anything in particular. But as soon as we came to a town, I had to do the driving because he regaled me with hair-raising, blood-curdling stories of mayhem and mishap and all the dreadful things that were going to happen if he were driving in a town. A fatal accident at the very least, or a confrontation with the Guardia Civil. So that was my experience of Grahame. I don't know why he thought my driving was going to be better. I don't know. It isn't. It's not that Grahame, not that he lacked courage. Grahame has never lacked courage. I mean, you consider this. For 40 years, he was a journalist, and a good journalist, on a major national newspaper in this country, the Los Angeles Times. For 30 of those 40 years, he covered soccer. He managed to convince the people at the Los Angeles Times that soccer was worth covering. And in those days, you needed a lot of courage to do that. It wasn't easy, believe me, to sell soccer in any way at all to the media in those days. So I'm going to, on Grahame's behalf now, I'm going to commit one of the worst of journalism's crimes now. This is a spot of plagiarism. Going to quote. Actually, this is all right because I'm quoting myself here. This is what I wrote last year when I learned of his retirement. Grahame knows his soccer. And his writing, whether game reports or the more discursive articles on how the sport is managed or mismanaged, was always suffused with soccer intelligence, but it was always alive with humor. Grahame has the gift of writing about serious subjects, but with a light touch that made everything readable and enjoyable without ever sliding into mere frivolity. And there's a memory here that emphasizes what I've just said there. We'd been together in St. Louis in 1988 for a game between the USA and Jamaica. I think it was the World Cup qualifier, was it? Whatever. The United States won 5-1, which is a pretty convincing scoreline. But that scoreline disguised the fact that the USA had not played at all well. In fact, I'm going to say they were lucky to win. The 5-1 scoreline was totally unrepresentative. And I remember after the game clambering onto the press bus and sitting there smiling in a bemused sort of way. It was Grahame who looked at me and said, puzzling about how to start off his story. He said to me, well, can you struggle to a 5-1 win? And it was that sort of humour. Quiet, understated, but very much to the point that he specialised in. More recently, commenting on a humiliating loss for Manchester United and Real Madrid's failure to beat Barcelona, both those results on the same day. Grahame led his story with, as the crow flies, about 787 miles separate London's Wembley from Madrid's Santiago Bernabeu. The crows aren't flying in either direction, however. They were eaten yesterday at both stadiums. Now that's beautifully done. It's accurate, it's witty, it's intriguing, and it's concise. The ability to say a lot with a few words and to do it elegantly is a skill. Maybe it's a gift, but it's not granted to many. And Grahame had it, and still no doubt has it in abundance. Today, you, and when I say you, I mean obviously the Hall of Fame, people who have arranged this, but everybody here is electing not only a splendid journalist, you're rewarding one of the nicest guys you could hope to find in our sports. So friends, with great pleasure, but with a tinge of regret that such a youngster should retire so early, may I present to you the Right Honourable Grahame L. Jones. Right. I'll finish this off. I'm calling him Right Honourable Right because he made a journalistic habit of getting things right. Honourable because that's exactly the word that's needed. Somebody who is eminently fit to be honoured. Grahame.
I'd like to thank my grandfather for those kind and generous words. Paul has been a friend for a long time. Trying to remember what exactly I was going to say. I knew I had a stage right up here. Paul and I go back a long way. As you say, the 82 World Cup, we were colleagues there. And I was going to mention this later in the story, but I've lost my way, so I'm going to start right now. We were good colleagues at that World Cup. We had a good time driving around the country, as he says. And we were a matched team because I needed his Spanish and he needed me to tell him what was going on in the game. So I thank you, Paul, for your words. You're totally wrong about writing, though. Writing isn't that difficult. Writing, all you need, a dictionary in one hand, preferably the Oxford English Dictionary, and a bottle of Johnny Walker Blue Label in the other. And all you do is you take some words out of the dictionary, select them, put them in some sort of pleasing order, and send them on their way. If it doesn't work, you reach for the bottle, and so on and so forth. Not that difficult.
I'd also like to thank Nike. And that's a surprise to many of you tonight because they've made a very generous gift, I understand, of $100,000 to the winner of this award. And all I have to do is mention Nike 100 times during the speech. So bear with me, please. This is a very humbling crowd to be in front of, and I hope you understand what's left of my accent, which is sort of mid-Atlantic somewhere. Welsh, yes, thank you. I'd like to thank US Soccer, the Hall of Fame, and especially Sunil Gulati, who told me last night that I could have an hour for the speech. He said, in fact, his words were, the longer you talk, Graham, the less we'll have to listen to Tony. And I don't know if he meant Miolo or De Chico, but that's what he said, so I'm taking it your word, and I've got about 57 minutes to go. What I'd like to talk about, and I'll leave the soccer stories to the coaches and the players because they were far more involved than the journalists ever are. We look on it from afar and try and analyze and try and comment, but they can tell the soccer stories. I'd like to go in a different direction. When US Soccer called me a couple of weeks ago and said that I was going to get this award and that some perceptive people had voted for me, thank you. My first thought was, what was my earliest soccer memory? What do I recall earliest? And it was of my father playing as an amateur in the early 1950s in Cape Town, South Africa. It was an amateur team. I don't know the name of the team. I don't know the name of the league or anything. But I remember as a small kid going out and watching him play. And the jersey he wore was sort of blue and green, blue and red, sort of Barcelona-like colors. And he wore these great big black heavy boots. I don't think they were Nikes. That's four. A few years later, in 1959, I saw my first professional soccer team. We were still living in Cape Town at the time, and Bolton Wanderers were riding high in the English First Division at the time, and came on a tour of South Africa in the off-season. My mouth's getting very dry, so you may want to bring me a... Bolton Wanderers came to Cape Town in the off-season and played at a stadium called Hartleyville there, and I went to see them. I don't remember the game, I don't remember the opponent, but I do remember buying a small black felt pennant that had Bolton Wanderers in 1959 written on it. And I still have that pennant 53 years later. It's in my garage in California, along with literally hundreds and hundreds of soccer pieces of soccer memorabilia that I've collected over the years, not purposely, but they've just accumulated and piled up in the garage. And there's things like a George Best game-worn jersey. There's things like a Pele autograph signed when he was still playing for Santos. There's things like a full set of framed posters from the first Women's World Cup in China in 1991. All sorts of things, books, magazines, pins, posters, press passes, just boxes and boxes of it. My wife calls it clutter. I call it memories, and I've hung on to it, and I will keep hanging on to it. Among those things, there's a poster, an advertising poster for the first game I covered. It was in 1973 at the Coliseum in Los Angeles, and it was between Mexico and Poland. And I'd like to start top with an international. And I covered that game. The Times wasn't writing about soccer, as Paul said in those days, but I convinced them that this was a game worth going to. There was a man named Tony Morahone in Los Angeles who was a promoter and president of the Greater Los Angeles Soccer League, and he, more than anyone else, was responsible for getting me into the sport. Anyway, Tony was promoting this game. I went out and covered it. I got a 4 or 5 inch story. They misspelled my byline, and that's how it all began. So that's the poster. There are some souvenirs that I wish I did have, and one in particular was during the 1995 Women's World Cup in Sweden. Mia Hamm celebrated her 21st birthday during that tournament. And on the morning of her birthday, the rest of the players and coaches toasted her with champagne. And then they had a team meeting. And I remember Mia rushing out of that meeting and reaching down and putting her champagne glass outside the door, not wanting to be drinking in the meeting. And I looked at it and I said to the photographer next to me, that would be a souvenir to have. That's the glass that Mia Hamm drank her champagne in on her 21st birthday during the World Cup. That is a souvenir. And before I could do anything, he ran and grabbed it. And 17 years later, he still has it. So Mia, if you want to know where it is, I can tell you, and you can go get it from him. So that's the champagne glass. I do have a soccer-related, alcohol-related souvenir. and not a whole bunch of empty bottles of Blue Label Johnny Walker. The US men were playing a qualifier against Jamaica in Kingston several years ago, quite a few years ago actually. And on the night before the game, the US press corps decided to go to find some jerk chicken or jerk goat or jerk something up in the hills. And for some reason, the Jamaican Federation had assigned us a woman security guard, nanny, babysitter, guide, whatever. But she took us to this place in the hills overlooking Kingston, and we had lovely chicken and we had fantastic red striped beer. But why I remember that story is because this woman, and I'd never seen this done before, opened each bottle with her teeth. And I was astonished. I couldn't believe that. There was these bent caps with teeth marks on them. So I grabbed one and put it in my pocket. That's also in my garage with all the other stuff to this day. Soccer items don't have to be valuable. Soccer memories, the story behind them is what's valuable. I do have one valuable item, though at least I'm told it's valuable. Somewhere along the line, I picked up a program and a match ticket for Manchester United's visit to Los Angeles in 1952. Didn't even know they'd come here then, but they did, and I have the proof. And I was covering with Paul the 2002 World Cup in South Korea and Japan. And before the final between Brazil and Germany in Yokohama, I ran into a man from England who was a collector of Manchester United memorabilia. I told him about the ticket I had, and he said, "I'll give you $1,000 right now for that." And I said, "No, it's staying in my garage, and it's still there." It's about the stories. And I'm not the only one with a garage full of memorabilia. I'm sure everyone in this room has some things that they've kept, memories of a game, of a player, of a coach, some moments of their career that you would have kept it because it was meaningful to you. And the fans are the same way. There's fans all across this country who have collections of memorabilia. And I think there needs to be something done to actually preserve this history. This Hall of Fame has a role here, and US Soccer has a whole. If the political will isn't there to build a new building, or the economics are not there, there's another solution. And I think it would be really nice for US Soccer's centenary year if there were a virtual soccer museum, an online site where people could donate their memorabilia, either physically or just a photo, and build it. And people could actually find out about the rich history of the sport in this country and enjoy it. And it'd be an ongoing thing. You don't go and visit it once because you add things every day, 10 or 12 items. So there's always a reason to come back and see what else is new. It wouldn't be that expensive. I think a virtual soccer museum would be a great idea. And with that, I think it's your history. It deserves to be celebrated. It's our history. It deserves to be remembered. Thank you very much for this award, and I hope you enjoy the game tonight.